Howdy guys, back again, and this time it's time for a review video. Today I'm going to be reviewing Cinder by Marissa Meyer. So before I read Cinder, I'm aware that it was a young adult book, picked it up from the library in the teen section. I didn't know too much about it. I knew that it was basically based on the story of Cinderella in a more dystopian future where she actually was a cyborg, and I think that really appealed to me because I really like science fiction. It's like my favourite genre to read, science fiction, so getting that alongside young adult, I thought this is going to be a cool book, and I'd heard great things about it, so I was really looking forward to reading it. I really enjoyed reading this book. I found it to be a really positive experience. The positives far outweighed the negatives. Felt that it just kept on getting better. It started well, I wasn't disappointed, and as it went on I found the second half of the book I got more and more into it, more and more gripped, in a way that I haven't done regularly with young adult fiction. Probably not since The Hunger Games. It really just ticked all the boxes for me. When I first started reading it, I found a lot of links to The Hunger Games, the kind of dystopian thing anyway, links to The Hunger Games, but then there was also a sort of drafting where people were chosen at random to go and be put forward for a particular job, an unpleasant one, and yeah, that reminded me of The Hunger Games, and also the having a younger sister that you really, really care for, and it plays a really pivotal role. So at first I thought this was kind of remarkably similar to The Hunger Games, but actually when I read the rest of it I didn't find it to be irritatingly so. I was also a bit nervous about the links to Cinderella. I mean, obviously I am a fully grown adult, and I thought this could end up being a bit of a cheese fest and not really my thing, but actually the links were quite subtle, I think. Although the links were there, they weren't a dominant part of the storyline, which I was quite relieved about. And actually the science fiction element was much stronger than I expected. So a huge positive for me was the science fiction element. I knew it was there with the cyborg, but I thought it was going to be kind of just because it was set in the future rather than a particularly dominant theme. Whereas when it sort of started talking about the Lunars, the race that live on the moon, there were similarities between the way it was describing a new world to the Isaac Asimov books that I love to read. Obviously in a much more aimed at a younger audience, a less intense way, but it still had that kind of new worldy thing that I love. I love learning about new worlds. I also think that Marissa Meyer is really good at building suspense and getting you interested in the story. But actually that really came into its own in the second half of the book, where I was completely gripped by the storyline and wanted to know what was going to happen, which I haven't felt that way in such a long time. At first, in the first half of the book, I found that a lot of the plot twists were quite expected, predictable, and I was, again, a bit concerned about that. But in the second half of the book, there were things I didn't see coming a mile off, and I really enjoyed that. I felt like I did not know how the story was going to end. One of my favourite moments when I was reading the book, there was a moment probably around the middle of the story where something happened to Cinder, something quite sad, and I was reading it, happily reading my book, and then I literally felt my face drop when I realised what had happened. It was such a shock to me, and it really got me. I mean, I'm not one to cry. I'm certainly not one to cry when I'm reading a book, but I literally felt my face drop. I was just reading it, and then I was like, oh no. And that was quite, yeah, having that kind of emotional response in a book is unusual for me, so I felt like I was really connected with the characters. I know I've said this 1,000 times, but I cannot get across to you how much I loved the second half of this book. It was fast-paced and exciting and gripping, and I wanted to know what was going to happen. There was never a dull moment, and I actually, for the first time in ages, got to a point where I was sitting up at night trying to read. In fact, I got to a point where I was 4 pages from the end, and I kept falling asleep, and I was like, I just want to finish the book. Yeah, and that desire to keep on reading was really, really strong. In terms of negatives, I think I'm going to struggle here. The first half of the book I was a bit cautious and nervous about, and that would be probably the only negative for me. There were a few things that I started to think, oh, this book's not going to go well. The girl meets boy thing, I felt it was going to go down a very simplistic, we meet, we fall in love, and we live happily ever after, and we're crazy about each other. And I'm not a fan of simplistic love stories. It was a bit simplistic. There didn't seem to be much, meeting on a deep emotional level. but their story wasn't simple. You know, they didn't just have an easy ride, and I suppose that detracted from it a bit. It certainly wasn't a main theme in the book, and I suppose I was quite happy about that. I'm a huge fan of this book. I really enjoyed it. I'm having such luck with books this year. I gave this 4 stars out of 5 on Goodreads, and I would probably say it's close to 4.5 than 5. I find it very difficult to give 5 stars to books. That is a real high accolade in my book. There are only a handful of books I've ever given 5 stars to. I highly recommend Cinder to anyone who is if you're into young adult books, you're going to really enjoy it. If you're into sci-fi and looking for something, you know, a bit simpler, just a bit of fun, you'll probably enjoy it too. I'm definitely going to be picking up the second book in the series. I haven't a clue what it's called, but it says in the back. I think it's called, is it Scarlet? Yeah, Scarlet. Definitely going to be picking that up. Quite looking forward to it, but I've got a few other books to tick through first. If you've read Cinder, then leave me a message letting me know what you think. Did you think similar to me, or did you have completely different thoughts? I would love to know. And if you have any recommendations of other books, that would be cool too. I'll see you next time, guys. Bye-bye.